so sexy, but so crazy.
Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. So today we are talking about Fear Street Part 1, 1994. Now, this is a trilogy of films that is coming out on Netflix, the next several weeks in a row, which I thought was a really cool idea. This is based off the Fear Street books that were released in the late 80s, early 90s. They might be still doing them right now. Funny enough, I didn't grow up reading the books. I do want to go back and check them out now. I was more, at the time, into Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, and things like that. So I think Fear Street might have been just a little bit older for me at the time, because it's aimed at young adults. So I didn't check them out when I was a kid, but I've heard great things. So I definitely, after, watching these movies, I want to go back and check them out for sure, because I love R.L. Stine. He was a big part of my childhood. And I was excited when I saw Netflix was doing this, just because I was I had heard of Fear Street. Like I said, didn't read the books or anything, but I had heard of it. And the fact that these were going to be rated R. As, a kid growing up in the 90s, now I'm in, my 30s, and I always wanted to have, one of these shows or whatever, but made for the adult that we are now. And I wanted it to be rated R. I thought that would be really cool, and that's exactly what they did with this film. So this is going to be a non-spoiler review. You don't have to worry about that. It just hit Netflix, this past week. Tried to get an early screener. Haven't had any luck with that, which really sucks. But yeah, I got to watch it yesterday, and without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about it. So again, this Fear Street Trilogy, it is based off 3 different time periods. So for the first film, this one we're talking about today is 1994. Next week is 1978. The following week, I believe, is 1666. So it's 3 different time periods, and it kind of centers around, from what I after watching this first film, and I believe kind of what they're going, because they're just going back in time. It centers around these 2 little towns, Shadyside and Sunnyside. There's these 2 towns, and the people in there, there's this kind of rivalry. They don't really like each other at all. They actually kind of hate each other. Shadyside is kind of almost the reject, Sunnyside thinks of them as kind of the reject town, and there's been all these murders and stuff that have happened over the years, in this town, so there's been a lot of tragedy and stuff. And Sunnyside is more, they're kind of perfect, and they, this perfect little town where you can raise a family, and they're right next to Shadyside, so it's that they're almost they consider them a stain, so they don't like each other at all. So you have that little rivalry kind of with these 2 towns, and that's what this kind of focuses on. This first movie is 1994, and then we're going to kind of go back in time, from what it looks like. So with the first one, the film, it opens up, and I actually absolutely loved this opening scene. And you're probably wondering why I have a Scream, Ghostface character right here. I actually just got him not too long ago. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you probably saw it. Hopefully, I thought I almost just knocked him down. But I picked him up, and you're probably why is he in there? Well, in this movie, specifically, the first scene, and there's another scene in the film, the first thing I want to say is that you can tell that this director loves the horror genre, because there is 2 scenes, like I said, the opening, and then there's another scene where they pay, a big tribute to Scream. And as you guys know, if you've been a fan of this channel, Scream is definitely, not only one of my favorite horror movies, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I thought that was really cool, especially this opening scene. I won't go into details, because I want you guys to check it out. I know they released a 5-minute preview, which I did actually watch because I was excited to see it. But yeah, I love this opening scene. Nice tribute to Scream there. And basically the movie, it opens up, there's this tragedy that happens, and we, as I kind of mentioned, we find out that this isn't the first time that something like this has happened in Shadyside. And we, as the film goes on, we have these main group of characters, and they're starting to unravel why maybe this, why this keeps happening in this town. And there's kind of this, this evil presence, they're kind of, controlling things. So I won't go into details, but that's kind of being very vague with the backstory. But yeah, so I mean, not only with this movie, not only does it pay tribute to Scream, there's also, I felt like there was a little bit of the faculty was in there to a degree. There was also I Know What You Did Last Summer. And this also, it feels like an adult, Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, movie, I mentioned in the beginning, and which is something I was really excited to see. They don't hold back. I was, even though I knew it was rated R, it was still, I was still kind of surprised with some of like, the kills and stuff like that. For the most part, I mean, there's a good amount of gore. It's not anything that's like, because I think I've seen some people where it's like, oh my God, it's like insane. There is one kill that's kind of towards the end of the movie that I was like, holy shit, like that really creative like kill like in a movie. God, I sound like a serial killer like talking about this, but there's a really creative kill like later on in the movie. But there is like a good amount of blood, guts, and gore and stuff like that. But I don't think it's like super like gory like like the Saw films or anything like that. God, I can't talk right now. But yeah, so, it kind of has that mixture. There's definitely tributes to like those like, early like 90s, slasher like horror flicks, which was really, really cool to see because, I grew up on that kind of stuff, loved all that. And it also, I'm going to say this and I mean it in a good way. This almost felt like, a like one of those like Halloween specials, something that you might see like on Freeform or one of those like channels where, it debuts like there for Halloween. And I like those, those kind of like movies. So it had a little bit of like that as well. It was just something that was really enjoyable, easy to sit through, and it was a lot of fun. They maybe, because it does take place in October, I feel like they maybe could have included, or at least like part of it does, a little bit more like Halloween. Like it's not like over the top, like, oh my God, you can tell it's like, fall and everything. But I know you do see like a couple pumpkins and stuff in there. So I thought that was pretty cool like as well. Overall too, I think as far as like all the characters, especially more so like, the main group of like, these like, teenagers, like young adults that we get, we kind of follow like in this film. I thought that they were all, all like, really fun. They do make there is some like, dumb decisions that are made by like some of the characters where it's like, don't you like watch like any scary movies? Like, what are you doing? But I think that's kind of like what the point, because they are paying tribute to, some of these like 90s slashers and horror films. And that happens a lot in a lot of these like slasher films. So I can kind of give like the film a pass because I think that's kind of like what they were going for. But I mean, yeah, as far as like the main group of characters, I pretty much like liked them all. Questionable decisions, but for the most part, I think, all the actors, they did a good job, with these like characters. And you did, I think, especially I found myself, caring more than I thought I did about, some of these characters, because when certain things happen, you're like, oh shit, like I didn't realize I actually cared as much as, I did with, this specific character with like, something that happens to him. So yeah, so that was, that's always good. And I think one of the things that I was kind of, worried about kind of going into this movie too, knowing that it was a trilogy, a first like movie in a trilogy, that I was a little worried. It's like, okay, are we going to watch this? We're going to get to the end and it's like, you need to see the rest of the films for it to make sense. And while I think that's, it's definitely going to help, I can say that I feel this movie does, stand on its own. It's something that you can watch and enjoy, by itself. Like, obviously, there is something that's leading into the next, like 2 films. But I think it's something that does, like, stand on its own, and you can still enjoy it for what it is, which is something I was really worried about. And I can't, I can't talk about this movie and not talk about the soundtrack. Like, wow, like, there are some awesome songs in there. I know I've seen, some people nitpicking because it's like, oh, these songs, like, came out, like, after, like, 1994 when this takes place. I think they were kind of going for, just like songs like in the 90s. Like, I do understand people saying like, well, it's in 1994, we shouldn't have these songs playing later. Like, I do get that. But overall, like, I really like the soundtrack, especially the opening of the film. We get 9 Inch Nails, Closer. That was really cool. And there's some other like, great like 90s bands like Bush and stuff like that in there. So the soundtrack was banging. I have most of the songs like already, but I kind of want to put a playlist, just for this movie and, listen to those. Cause yeah, that was a lot of fun having those all in there. One of the only like negative things that I would say really about this film is that, it takes place in 1994. And there is, there's definitely, I mean, like, you got, like, the music. There is some aspects that it's like AOL, that's, like, in there. So it's, like, there is things that show that this is in the 90s. But there was a good amount of time where I also kind of, it didn't feel completely like in the 90s. Like it's like, oh, you could almost see these characters being like in present day. So I wish they would have almost dived a little bit more like into that 90s nostalgia, and not necessarily just for like, like nostalgia's sake. Like obviously, make it work and like it has to fit naturally into the story, but I wish we would have gotten more of that in this film, because I feel like where it's taking place in the 90s, you didn't always feel that way, and that just took away from the film just like a little bit. It wasn't like a big detractor, but wish we had gotten more in that. Overall though, Fear Street Part 1, 1994, pays tributes to 1990s slashers and has its own identity while doing so, and I had a lot of fun watching this, guys, man. It was, like I said, I've always been like a fan of Goosebumps and things like that, so I mean, it definitely gave me a lot of nostalgia, watching this movie, and I've always been, a fan of like the horror genre and slashers like themselves, so that was really cool. So I think that a lot, especially if you are like a horror fan, I think you guys are going to appreciate it, and I love that we get 3 films like in 3 weeks in a row too. We don't have to wait like in between, so really cool that we got to have this on like Netflix. I can't wait to see what part 2 has to offer us, and yeah, I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Is this something that you already checked out? Let me know what you think of part 1 down below in the comments. Are you going to be watching part 2 and part 3? And what was your favorite thing about like the first like movie? Definitely let me know. If you use spoilers, just make sure that you give people like a heads up, so that way they can try and avoid that. Overall, guys, I'm going to give this a score of 8 out of 10. Like I said, I had a lot of fun with this. I watched it twice already, and it's something that I could see myself, revisiting. It'll be really cool to see once we get all 3 of these films too, just to see how they kind of like all tie into each other. So 8 out of 10 for me. But yeah, I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. If you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it. That way you get notifications for all my new videos. I'm actually really excited to share with you guys. I'm going to be having an interview with someone from Fear Street coming up on this channel soon. So make sure, again, if you are new, hit that subscribe button. Keep an eye out on this channel because that will be coming up. And I also will be covering, part 2 and part 3 as well. So yeah, thank you guys for, for checking out this video. Please give the video a thumbs up. And as always, guys, please make sure to check back for more Pop Culture with Pat.